The red dust of New Mexico territory hung in the air like a curse that summer of 1875. It clung to everything: the weathered boards of the ranch house, the leather chaps of the cowboys, and the parched throats of both man and beast. Cole Walker stood on his porch, squinting against the merciless sun, watching his cattle struggle to find grass where there was none. "Mr. Walker," the voice belonged to Jimmy Hendricks, his youngest ranch hand, barely 17 and still trying to grow a proper mustache. The boy came running from the direction of town, his horse lathered with sweat. Cole didn't move, just shifted his weight slightly. At 34, he'd learned that most news worth hearing would wait for a man to catch his breath. His weathered face, carved by wind and sun into something resembling the local sandstone, betrayed nothing of his thoughts. "They're coming, sir," Jimmy gasped out, bending over with his hands on his knees. "Banker Morrison and them others said they'll be here before sunset." Now Cole moved, but only to pull out his pocket watch. 3 o'clock. That gave him maybe 3 hours to figure out how to save the only thing his father had left him beside a stubborn streak and a distrust of city folk. "How many?" His voice was low, gravelly from years of dust and sparse conversation. "5, maybe 6. That Deacon Hale's with them, too." Cole's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Deacon Hale, a man who wore his self-righteousness like a Sunday suit but had the soul of a buzzard. The kind of man who'd quote scripture while stealing the coins from a dead man's eyes. "Get the boys in from the range," Cole ordered. "Tell them to come armed but peaceable. We're not looking for trouble." "Yes, sir." Jimmy turned to go, then hesitated. "Mr. Walker, my PA says there might be a way out of this. Says the territorial laws got provisions for family holdings. A married man with a proper household can't be forced off ancestral land for debt, long as he's working it." Cole's gray eyes, the color of storm clouds over the desert, fixed on the boy. "Your pa's been reading law books again." "Yes, sir. He clerked back in Kansas before coming out here." "Tell your PA I appreciate the thought, but I buried my wife 3 years back. Don't reckon on taking another." Jimmy shifted uncomfortably. "Well, sir, that's the thing. There's a woman just come to town, staying at the boarding house. Mrs. Patterson won't hardly talk to her, and the other ladies cross the street when they see her coming." "What's that got to do with my land?" "Pa says she's looking for work, any kind. Says she's desperate enough that she might consider an arrangement, a business arrangement, like—" Cole turned fully to face the boy now. "You telling me your PA thinks I should buy myself a wife to save my land?" "Not buy, sir." Jimmy's face flushed red beneath his sunburn. "Just a mutual benefit situation. She needs a home. You need a wife, temporary like, maybe." "What's wrong with her?" "Sir, the woman. If the town's women won't talk to her, something must be wrong with her." Jimmy looked down at his boots. "They say she brings bad luck. Came from Las Cruces. And before that, somewhere in Texas. Every place she's been, seems like trouble follows. Drought, disease, fires. Course, that's just foolish talk, but you know how folks are." Cole did know. In a land where survival often hung by a thread as thin as a spring rain or as fragile as a healthy herd, people looked for someone to blame when things went wrong. A stranger, especially a young woman traveling alone, made an easy target. "What's her name?" "Clara Rose, sir. Least that's what she's calling herself." Cole studied the horizon where dust devils danced like dervishes. His father had fought Apaches, outlaws, and nature itself to hold on to this land. Was Cole going to lose it to a banker's ledger? "Tell your PA I'll think on it," he said finally. "Now get going." As Jimmy rode off, Cole walked through his house 4 rooms that still held the ghost of his wife's presence. Sarah's quilt on the bed, her good china in the cupboard, the rocking chair where she'd sat to mend clothes now gathering dust. He'd married for love once. The thought of marrying for land felt like betrayal. But the dead don't need land, and the living don't eat principles. 2 hours later, Cole Walker rode into Cedar Springs, a town that aspired to be more than a collection of wooden buildings baking in the sun. The church at one end and the saloon at the other represented the eternal struggle for men's souls, with most folks finding themselves somewhere in the uncomfortable middle. He tied his horse outside Patterson's boarding house, a 2-story building that had seen better days. Mrs. Patterson herself sat on the porch, her face pursed like she'd been sucking lemons. Afternoon, Mrs. Patterson. She nodded curtly. Mr. Walker, if you're here about that woman, she's in the parlor, though why a respectable man would want to associate with her kind is beyond my understanding. Her kind? You know what I mean. Trouble follows some people like flies follow cattle. That one's got the mark on her. Sure as anything. Cole touched his hat brim and went inside. The parlor was dim after the bright sun, and it took a moment for his eyes to adjust. When they did, he saw her. Clara Rose sat by the window, her back straight as a ramrod, hands folded in her lap. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 21 or 22, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, and a face that would have been beautiful if not for the wariness in her green eyes. She wore a gray dress that had been mended too many times, but it was clean and pressed. Miss Rose. She turned to face him fully, and he saw the pride there, fierce and unbroken despite whatever had driven her to this point. Yes, and you are. Cole Walker. I own the Double Bar Ranch north of town. The man who needs a wife. It wasn't a question. Her voice was educated, with a slight southern drawl that spoke of better days. Word travels fast. Desperate women learn to listen carefully. Mr. Walker, I heard about your situation from the kitchen girl this morning. She stood, and he noticed she was taller than most women, nearly matching his own height. Shall we dispense with pleasantries? You need a wife to keep your land. I need a place to live where I won't be run out of town for existing. It seems we might help each other. Her directness surprised him. Most women he knew wrapped their words in so much politeness you could barely find the meaning. You always this forthright. I've found that poverty strips away the luxury of delicacy. Mr. Walker, I have $7 to my name, no family, and a reputation that precedes me like a plague warning. I can cook, clean, mend, and I'm not afraid of hard work. I can also read, write, and cipher, if that matters. What I cannot do is continue to pretend that my situation will improve through wishing. Cole studied her, up close. He could see the hunger in the hollow of her cheeks, the careful mending in her dress, the way she held herself like someone expecting a blow but determined not to flinch. Why do they say you bring bad luck? Her laugh was bitter. Because it's easier than admitting that bad luck comes to everyone eventually. I was in Amarillo when the drought hit, in Las Cruces when the fever came through, in Silver City when the mine collapsed. Never mind that I was teaching school in Amarillo, nursing the sick in Las Cruces, and working as a seamstress in Silver City. When fear comes calling, it needs a face, and a woman alone makes an easy target. Were you married before? No. She met his eyes directly. Though there are those who'll tell you different. Amazing how a woman's history can be rewritten by those who find her inconvenient. Cole felt the weight of the decision pressing on him. Outside, he could hear the normal sounds of town life horses, wagons, the distant ring of the blacksmith's hammer. Inside this dim parlor, he was contemplating changing his life based on necessity rather than choice. It wouldn't be a real marriage, he said finally. I mean, it would be legal, but I understand perfectly. Mr. Walker, you need a wife on paper to satisfy the law. I need a roof and protection from those who would see me driven into the desert. Neither of us is looking for romance. I assume you have adequate sleeping arrangements that would allow for propriety. There's a room off the kitchen. Was meant for a cook, but we never hired one. It's small but private. Privacy is a luxury I haven't enjoyed in months. Mr. Walker, small as relative. He made his decision then, based on instinct more than logic. There was steel in this woman, despite her circumstances, maybe because of them. Can you ride? I can learn. Can you shoot? My father taught me. Back when I had a father. I haven't handled a gun in years. But I imagine it's like riding a bicycle once learned. Not forgotten. We don't have bicycles on the ranch. Miss Rose. Was that almost a smile that crossed her face? Then I suppose I'll have to make do with horses. Mr. Walker. The town won't welcome you any better as my wife than they do now. Might be worse. People get peculiar about their neighbors' choices. I'm already a pariah, Mr. Walker, at least as your wife. I'll be a pariah with a bed and regular meals. Cole pulled out his watch again, less than an hour before Morrison and his vultures arrived at the ranch. There's a judge who does marriages. Judge Hawthorne, he's probably at the saloon this time of day. How romantic. This time she did smile, and it transformed her face, giving him a glimpse of who she might have been before life had ground her down. Shall we proceed with this business transaction, Mr. Walker? As they left the boarding house, Mrs. Patterson's disapproving glare following them. Cole wondered if he was saving his land or inviting disaster. Clara Rose walked beside him, her head high despite the whispers that followed their passage down Main Street. At the saloon, they found Judge Hawthorne as expected, nursing a whiskey and losing at cards. He looked up with bleary eyes as Cole approached. Walker, heard Morrison's coming for you today. That's why I'm here. Judge, need you to perform a marriage? The judge's eyes sharpened, moving from Cole to Clara. That the woman folks are talking about the cursed one. Her name is Miss Clara Rose, and she's about to be Mrs. Walker, you going to do your job or not? Judge Hawthorne stood, swaying slightly. Got witnesses. Cole looked around the saloon. Most men avoided his gaze, not wanting to be associated with the town's bad luck charm. Finally, Tom Henderson, Jimmy's father, stood up. I'll witness, he said. Another man, Jose Martinez, who supplied horses to the double bar, slowly nodded and joined them. The ceremony was brief and without joy. Clara's voice was steady as she repeated her vows, and if her hands trembled slightly, no one commented. Cole slipped his mother's ring onto her finger. He'd kept it in his pocket since Sarah died. Not sure why until this moment. By the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, I pronounce you man and wife. Judge Hawthorne concluded, May God have mercy on you both. As they signed the papers, Cole heard horses approaching fast. Through the saloon's dusty window, he saw Morrison's group riding hard toward the ranch. We need to go, he told Clara. Can you ride in that dress? I'll manage. He helped her onto Jimmy's horse, which the boy had left tied outside, then mounted his own. As they rode out of town, he heard Deacon Hale's voice raised in righteous indignation from somewhere behind them. Let them come, Clara said, reading his glance back. I'm your legal wife now, Mr. Walker. Whatever that means for your land, we'll face it together. Cole looked at this strange, proud woman he'd just married and felt something shift inside him. He'd thought he was just saving his land, but as they rode toward the double bar with the sun setting behind them, he wondered if he'd gotten more than he'd bargained for. The red dust swirled around them as they rode, and for the first time in 3 years, Cole Walker didn't feel entirely alone. The dust had barely settled from their arrival when Morrison's group thundered into the ranch yard. Cole helped Clara down from her horse, noting how she winced slightly but made no complaint. Her dress was dusty from the hard ride, but she smoothed it with dignity before turning to face their visitors. Stay behind me, Cole murmured. I'm your wife now, Mr. Walker, she replied quietly. I stand beside you, not behind. Morrison dismounted first, his city clothes looking out of place against the backdrop of weathered ranch buildings. He was a soft man trying to look hard, with pale skin that the sun had turned an angry red. Behind him, Deacon Hale sat his horse like a carrion bird waiting for something to die. "Walker," Morrison began, pulling papers from his saddlebag. "I have here—" "A marriage certificate," Cole interrupted, producing the document Judge Hawthorne had just signed, making this ranch a family holding under territorial law. "You know the statutes, Morrison. A man can't be forced off ancestral land for debt if he's maintaining a proper household." Morrison's face darkened. "You think you're clever marrying some?" His eyes flicked to Clara with obvious disdain. "Woman off the street. Careful how you speak about my wife." Cole's voice carried a warning that made several of the men shift nervously. Deacon Hale dismounted with theatrical gravity. He was tall and gaunt, with eyes that burned with the fervor of a man who confused his own desires with God's will. "Mrs. Walker, is it now? How convenient. Tell me, ma'am, which town did you curse before coming to Cedar Springs?" Clara stepped forward, and Cole saw steel in her spine. "I curse no one, Mr. Hale, though if I had such power, I might start with men who hide cruelty behind Scripture." "Blasphemy!" Hale's voice rose. "You see, Morrison, this is what Walker has brought onto his land. Mark my words, within a month, his cattle will sicken, his wells will run dry, and—" "My wells ran dry 2 months ago." Cole cut in. "My cattle have been struggling since spring. All that happened long before Mrs. Walker arrived. Unless you're saying she can curse backwards through time." Some of Morrison's men chuckled, earning a glare from Hale. Morrison studied the marriage certificate with a banker's eye for detail. "This appears legal," he admitted grudgingly. "But I wonder how long this marriage of convenience will last. The law requires a genuine household. Walker, not a sham." "Nothing sham about it," Cole said. "My wife will live here, work here, and be mistress of this house. That's as genuine as any marriage I've seen." "We'll be watching," Morrison promised. "One sign that this isn't legitimate, and we'll be back." He remounted, then looked down at Clara. "You might have found shelter here, woman, but don't think the good people of Cedar Springs will forget what you are." After they left, Cole and Clara stood in the dusty yard, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The ranch hands emerged from various positions around the property, rifles in hand. Boss Billy Tate, his foreman, approached cautiously. He was a grizzled veteran of 40-some years who'd worked for Cole's father. "Everything all right?" "Fine. Billy, this is Mrs. Walker. She'll be taking charge of the house." Billy touched his hat brim. "Ma'am." His eyes were curious but not unkind. "Mr. Tate." Clara nodded graciously, as if she were greeting him in a proper parlor rather than a dusty ranch yard. "Show her the house, would you?" Cole asked. "I need to check the east pasture." He was halfway to the barn when Clara's voice stopped him. "Mr. Walker." He turned. "Thank you," she said simply. Cole nodded and continued to the barn, unsure why those 2 words made him feel like he'd done something more than a business transaction. The house felt different with a woman in it again. Cole tried to ignore the sounds of Clara moving about as he sat at the kitchen table with his ledgers, calculating how long their feed would last if the drought continued. She'd taken inventory of the pantry, checked the state of the linens, and was now preparing supper from the meager supplies available. "You don't have to cook," he said without looking up. "The hands and I usually just throw something together." "I noticed," she replied dryly. "Is there a reason you have 17 cans of beans and nothing else in your pantry?" "Beans keep. So does jerky, dried fruit, and cornmeal. Yet I see none of those." She moved efficiently around the kitchen. and he found himself watching despite his intention to focus on the ledgers. "When was the last time you went to the general store?" "A month ago, maybe more. I'll need to go to town tomorrow for supplies." Cole set down his pencil. "That might not be wise. You heard Morrison." "I heard a bitter man trying to intimidate us." Clara set a plate in front of him beans, but somehow she'd made them smell appetizing with the addition of wild onions and herbs he didn't know he had. "I won't hide in this house like a criminal. Mr. Walker. That would only confirm their suspicions." "It's Cole," he said abruptly. "If we're going to make this look real, you should call me Cole." "Then you must call me Clara." She sat across from him with her own plate. "Tell me about the ranch. How bad is the situation?" He was surprised by the directness of her interest. Sarah had never asked about ranch business. "Bad enough. We've lost 30 head to the drought already. The remaining cattle are ranging farther and farther for grass. If we don't get rain soon." "How much do you owe Morrison?" $800. Might as well be 8,000 for all I can pay it." Clara ate thoughtfully. "What about selling some land?" "Can't. It's all tied up in the deed. My father made sure of that. He'd seen too many ranches carved up and sold piecemeal. It's all or nothing." "Wise man." She paused. "I have $7. It's yours if it helps." Cole looked up sharply. "That's your money." "I'm your wife now. What's mine is yours." A bitter smile crossed her face. "All $7 of it." "Keep your money," he said gruffly, uncomfortable with the offer. "We'll manage." They ate in silence for a while. Then Clara asked, "Where are your wife's things?" Cole's hand stilled on his fork. "Packed away in the bedroom closet. You can use whatever you need." "That's kind, but I wouldn't feel right wearing another woman's clothes. I'll make do with what I have until I can earn enough for fabric." "Earn?" "I can take in sewing, if any of the town women will hire me, or perhaps mending for the ranch hands." "They can mend their own clothes." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Can they?" "Because I noticed young Jimmy's shirt has more holes than fabric." A ghost of a smile crossed Cole's face. "Jimmy's still learning the finer points of barbed wire. All the more reason he needs someone who can sew a straight seam." She stood and began clearing the dishes. "I won't be a burden. Cole, I mean to earn my keep. You already are. Just by being here. Being my wife, you're saving the ranch." "A business arrangement," she reminded him. "Nothing more." Later, after she'd retired to the small room off the kitchen, Cole sat on the porch in his customary evening spot. The stars were coming out, brilliant in the clear desert air. He could hear Clara moving about in her room, the rustle of fabric, the creak of the bed as she settled in. His wife, the word felt foreign. With Sarah, being married had felt as natural as breathing. This was different, calculated, careful, constructed out of mutual desperation rather than affection. Yet Clara had handled Morrison and Hale with more grace than he'd expected. There was strength in her that the townspeople mistook for a curse. "Can't sleep either," Clara's voice came from the doorway. He turned to find her wrapped in a shawl, her hair loose around her shoulders. It made her look younger, more vulnerable than the composed woman who'd faced down Hale earlier. "A habit," he said. "I like to check the horizon before bed, watch for weather changes." She moved to stand at the porch rail, looking out over the dark landscape. "It's so vast here. In the cities where I've lived, you can't see the sky properly. Here, it feels like you could fall upward into all those stars." "Where are you from originally?" "Virginia. My father had a small farm before the war. She shrugged. After, there was nothing left. He died trying to rebuild. My mother followed soon after. I've been moving west ever since, looking for somewhere to stop running." "Maybe you've found it." She glanced at him. "Maybe, though I suspect Mr. Hale has other plans. Hale's a snake who uses God as an excuse for his venom. Don't pay him mind. Hard not to when he's turning the town against us." She pulled the shawl tighter. I know what I am to them. Cole, a convenient scapegoat for their fears. I've been one before, but I won't let them destroy what you've built here. It's not your fight. It became my fight the moment I said, I do. She turned to face him fully. I may not be the wife you wanted, but I'm the wife you have. I keep my bargains. Something shifted in Cole's chest, a loosening of a knot he hadn't realized was there. Sarah would have liked you, he said quietly. She had the same kind of backbone. Tell me about her. Cole was silent so long that Clara began to turn away, but then he spoke. She was the schoolmaster's daughter, proper and educated, but not afraid of hard work. She could make this place feel like a palace just by being in it. When the fever took her, he stopped, unable to continue. I'm sorry, Clara said simply. I won't try to replace her. I wouldn't want you to. He stood. We should both get some sleep. Tomorrow will bring its own troubles. As Clara turned to go inside, she paused. Cole, what you did today marrying a stranger to save your land, some would call it foolish. What would you call it? Brave, she said softly. And kind. Not many men would take on a cursed woman's burdens. You're not cursed, Clara, just unlucky. What's the difference? Luck can change. In her small room, Clara unpacked her few belongings, 2 dresses, a Bible that had been her mother's, a silver brush with half its bristles missing, and a small daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. She placed the picture on the rough wooden dresser and studied their young, hopeful faces. I married him to save his land, she whispered to the image. Just like he married me for the same reason. It's business, nothing more. But as she lay in the narrow bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling for the night, she remembered the way Cole had defended her to Morrison and Hale, the quiet dignity in his manner, the pain in his voice when he spoke of his first wife. She'd been in enough towns to recognize a good man when she saw one. They were rarer than water in this desert land. And now, through the strange twist of mutual necessity, she was married to one. Don't be foolish, she told herself firmly. He made it clear what this is, a business arrangement, nothing more. But her traitorous heart, which had been locked away for so long, began to whisper dangerous words like home and belonging. She pushed them aside. She'd learned the hard way that hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. Still, as sleep finally took her, she found herself thinking that if she had to enter a marriage of convenience, she could have done far worse than Cole Walker. The next morning brought new challenges. Clara woke before dawn, dressed in her best worn dress, and began preparing breakfast. The ranch hands filed in uncertainly, clearly unsure how to act around the new Mrs. Walker. Gentlemen, Clara greeted them calmly. I'm not changing anything about how this ranch runs, but I am going to ensure you're properly fed. Sit. Billy Tate grinned. Yes, ma'am, boys, you heard the lady. As the men ate real biscuits instead of hardtack, eggs she'd found hidden in the henhouse, and coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe, Clara mentally cataloged what needed to be done. The house needed a thorough cleaning, the pantry restocking, and the men's clothes were in desperate need of attention. Mrs. Walker, Jimmy ventured. This is the best breakfast we've had in years. Then you've been sadly neglected. Mr. Hendricks. She refilled his coffee. A working man needs proper fuel. Cole entered last, having been out checking the cattle. He stopped short at the sight of his men gathered around the table like a proper crew instead of scattered about eating cold beans from cans. Saved you a plate, Clara said, setting it at his customary place, though the biscuits may be cold. He sat slowly, aware of his men watching. The food was simple but good, and the coffee was better than anything he'd made in 3 years. Thank you, he said quietly. After the hands left for their daily work, Clara began cleaning with a vengeance. Cole tried to help, but she shooed him away. You have a ranch to run. Let me handle the house. By midday, she'd transformed the main room. Dust was banished, surfaces gleamed, and she'd even found wildflowers for the table. The place looked lived in again instead of merely endured. "I need to go to town," she announced when Cole came in for the noon meal. "We need supplies." "Clara, I won't hide," she said firmly. "That only feeds their gossip. Besides, if I'm to be a proper rancher's wife, I need to face them eventually." Cole studied her determined face and recognized a will as unbending as his own. "I'll come with you." "No, you have work here. I can handle a few disapproving looks." "It might be more than looks." "Then I'll handle that too." She untied her apron. "I've been run out of 3 towns. Cole, I know how to read the signs of when to leave. We're not there yet." Against his better judgment, Cole helped her hitch up the wagon. "Take Billy with you at least." "That would look like I'm afraid." Being smart isn't the same as being afraid. She considered this, then nodded. "All right, for your peace of mind," as she drove away with Billy riding alongside. Cole watched from the porch with an uneasy feeling in his gut. He'd married her to save his land, but already she was becoming something more, a presence that filled the empty spaces in his life, and that terrified him more than losing the ranch. The morning Clara decided to learn to ride properly dawned clear and mercilessly hot. She stood in the corral, wearing a split skirt she'd fashioned from one of her dresses, facing a mare that Billy Tate swore was gentle as a lamb. "That's a mighty big lamb," Clara muttered, approaching the horse with determined caution. Cole watched from his position by the fence, trying not to smile. His new wife had been on the ranch for 2 weeks now, and she'd attacked every challenge with the same stubborn determination she was showing now. "Don't let her know you're afraid," Jimmy offered helpfully. "Horses can smell fear." "I'm not afraid," Clara said, though her white knuckles on the bridle suggested otherwise. "I'm merely respectful of her size." The mare, Buttercup, chose that moment to snort and shake her head, sending Clara stumbling backward into Cole's chest. He steadied her with hands on her shoulders, and for a moment, they both froze at the unexpected contact. "Sorry," Clara said, stepping away quickly, her cheeks flushing. "Take your time," Cole said, his voice rougher than intended. "No shame in being cautious." Their trip to town the previous week had been difficult. The women had turned their backs. The men had stared with open suspicion, and someone had thrown a rotten apple at their wagon. Clara had held her head high throughout, but Cole had seen her hands tremble as she'd conducted her business at the general store. Now she approached Buttercup again, this time with more confidence. "Nice horse. Good horse. Please don't throw me into next Tuesday." Billy chuckled. "She won't throw you, ma'am. Old Buttercup here has trained half the kids in the county." "Comforting," Clara said dryly. She managed to mount with only minimal awkwardness, gathering the reins with careful precision. "Back straight," Cole instructed, moving closer. "Relax your shoulders. You're holding those reins like they're going to bite you." "They might," Clara said, but she adjusted her grip. "How do I make her go?" "Gentle squeeze with your knees, and for the love of don't kick her." Clara's first attempt sent Buttercup into a sedate walk around the corral. Her second had the mare moving at a comfortable pace. By her 10th circuit, she was grinning. "I'm doing it. I'm actually riding." "You're walking," Cole corrected, but there was warmth in his voice. "Riding comes later." "Don't spoil this for me. Co-walker, I'm having a moment." Jimmy laughed. "She's got you there, boss." Over the following days, Clara's riding lessons became a regular event. The ranch hands found excuses to be near the corral during these sessions, enjoying the entertainment of their usually composed mistress learning to handle a horse. "Lean into the turn, Mrs. Walker," Billy called out as Clara attempted to guide Buttercup around a barrel. "I am leaning any more, and I'll be horizontal." Cole found himself looking forward to these moments. Clara's determination was matched only by her ability to laugh at herself, a trait Sarah had never possessed. Sarah had been perfect at everything she attempted. Clara was gloriously, humanly imperfect. The thought made him feel guilty, and he turned away from the corral. "You're getting attached to her." Cole looked up to find Jose Martinez leaning against the fence beside him. The older man had a knowing look in his weathered face. "She's my wife," Cole said simply. "See, but you married her for the land? Now you watch her like a man watches a woman, not a business partner. You're seeing things that aren't there." Jose shrugged. "Maybe, but I see how she looks at you too, amigo, like a woman trying not to hope." That evening, Clara served supper with barely concealed excitement. She'd managed to trade some mending work for fresh vegetables from the Hendricks family, and the meal was the best they'd had since her arrival. "Tomorrow, I want to try helping with the cattle," she announced. Cole nearly choked on his coffee. "Absolutely not." "Why, I can ride now." "Well, mostly. And you need every hand you can get with the herd so scattered." "Herding cattle isn't like riding around the corral. Clara, it's dangerous work." Her chin lifted in the way he'd come to recognize as trouble. "So is standing still while the ranch fails. I won't be useless." "Cole." "You're not useless. You've done more for this place in 2 weeks than what then, sitting inside darning socks while you and the men work themselves to death trying to save this ranch." "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" Her green eyes flashed with challenge. Cole set down his fork carefully. "I meant that you've already done more than anyone could expect. The house, the meals, dealing with the town." "Dealing with the town." Clara's laugh was bitter. "You mean being spat at by Mrs. Morrison having the minister's wife cross the street to avoid me overhearing Deacon Hale tell everyone that the drought has worsened since I arrived. Has he been bothering you?" "No more than expected." She stood abruptly, beginning to clear dishes with sharp movements. "I'm not made of glass. Cole, I won't break from a little hard work. It's about you still seeing me as the desperate woman you married 2 weeks ago." Clara interrupted. "But I'm not her anymore. I'm a rancher's wife now." "Your wife, and I mean to act like it." The word wife hung between them, loaded with implications neither wanted to examine. Cole watched her move about the kitchen, noting the determined set of her shoulders, the way she attacked the dishes as if they'd personally offended her. "Fine," he said finally. "You can help move the herd to the north pasture tomorrow, but you stay with Billy. And if he says it's too dangerous, you come back. No arguments." Clara turned, surprise flickering across her face. "Really?" "I don't say things I don't mean." A genuine smile broke across her face, transforming her from merely pretty to beautiful. "Thank you, Cole." He nodded and escaped to the porch, needing distance from that smile and what it did to his carefully maintained walls. The next morning, Clara appeared in the kitchen wearing men's pants and one of Cole's old shirts tied at the waist. She'd braided her hair tightly and covered it with a borrowed hat. "Don't say a word," she warned as Cole stared. "Wasn't going to." He managed. In truth, he was struggling with the unexpected effect of seeing her in pants. They revealed curves her dresses had hidden, and the sight was doing uncomfortable things to his composure. The other hands were similarly struck speechless when she emerged from the house. "What?" Clara demanded. "You've never seen a woman in pants before." "No, ma'am," Jimmy admitted, his ears turning red. "Leastways, not a respectable woman." "Well, now you have. Shall we get to work? Or would you all like to continue gawking?" The work was harder than Clara had anticipated. The cattle were scattered across the parched landscape, reluctant to leave whatever scrub grass they'd found. Dust rose in choking clouds. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Buttercup proved to have her own opinions about chasing cattle. But Clara persisted, following Billy's instructions and gradually getting a feel for the work. When a young steer broke from the herd, she instinctively moved to block it, guiding it back with a competence that surprised everyone, including herself. "Well, I'll be damned," Billy muttered. "Pardon my language, ma'am, but you're a natural." "I had a good teacher," Clara replied, flushed with success. Cole watched from across the herd, fighting the warmth that spread through his chest. His business arrangement wife was turning into something else entirely, and he wasn't sure what to do about it. The crack of gunfire shattered the morning's work. Clara's horse reared, nearly throwing her. Cole was beside her in seconds, grabbing Buttercup's bridle and scanning for the source of the shot. "There," Jimmy pointed to a group of riders approaching from the east. Deacon Hale led them, his black coat making him look like a carrion bird against the pale landscape. Behind him rode 6 men from town, all armed. "Stay calm," Cole told his crew. "Billy, you and Jose flanking positions. Jimmy, get Mrs. Walker back to the house." "I'm not running," Clara said firmly. "Clara." "No, whatever this is about, we face it together." Hale reined in just outside comfortable talking distance, making them shout to be heard. "Walker, we've come with a proposition." "State your business, Hale." The good people of Cedar Springs have taken up a collection. Hale produced a leather pouch, hefting it so the coins jangled. "Enough to buy passage to California for your wife. One way." Clara guided her horse forward before Cole could stop her. "How charitable. And what makes you think I want your money?" "Come now, Mrs. Walker, or whoever you really are. We both know this marriage is a sham. Take the money, spare this man further embarrassment, and move on to curse some other town." "The only curse I see here is small-minded people who blame others for their own misfortunes." Clara shot back. "Did I cause the drought? Did I poison your wells? Or is it easier to blame a stranger than admit that sometimes bad things simply happen?" One of the men with Hale shifted uncomfortably. "She's got a point. Deacon, the drought started before she came." Silence. Hale's face darkened. "You see how she twists words, how she turns brother against brother. This is her evil at work." "The only evil I see is a man using God's name to spread hate," Clara said. "Tell me, Mr. Hale, which scripture commands you to drive out strangers? I seem to recall something about entertaining angels unaware." Cole moved his horse closer to hers. A united front. "You've said your piece, Hale. Now get off my land." "This isn't over," Hale promised. "When your cattle sicken, when your wells fail completely, when everything you've built crumbles, remember that you could have prevented it. All you had to do was send her away." As the group rode off, Clara's shoulders sagged. The bravado that had carried her through the confrontation evaporated, leaving her looking young and tired. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I've brought this trouble to your door." "Our door," Cole corrected. "And Hale's been looking for a way to get this land for years. You're just his latest excuse." That evening, the ranch was subdued. The hands ate quietly, affected by the day's confrontation. Clara barely touched her food, pushing it around her plate with mechanical movements. "I should take the money," she said suddenly. "Leave before this gets worse." "No." Cole's response was immediate and firm. "You don't understand. I've seen this before. It starts with threats, then we handle it together." He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "You're not running anymore. Clara, this is your home now." She looked at their joined hands, his sun darkened and calloused, hers work roughened but still pale. "Home," she repeated softly. I'd almost forgotten what that word meant. "Then let me remind you," Cole said. "Home is where you stand your ground, where you fight for what's yours, where people have your back even when times are hard. Is that what we have each other's backs?" "That's what I'm offering." Clara turned her hand palm up, lacing her fingers through his. "Then that's what I'm accepting." Neither of them pulled away, sitting in the lamplight with their hands clasped, finding comfort in the simple human connection. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and sending dust devils dancing across the yard. "Storm coming," Billy observed from his seat by the stove. "Maybe," Cole agreed, but he wasn't looking at the windows. He was watching Clara's face, seeing the play of emotions there: fear, determination, and something else that made his heart beat faster. "Cole," Clara's voice was hesitant. "What if Hale's right not about the curse, but about the marriage? What if people never believe it's real?" "Then we make it real," he said without thinking. The words hung between them, loaded with possibilities neither had expected when they'd stood before Judge Hawthorne 2 weeks ago. Clara's eyes widened, her lips parting slightly in surprise. "I mean," Cole said quickly, "we make it look real, to the town." "Of course," Clara agreed, though something flickered in her eyes: disappointment. "That's what you meant." She pulled her hand away, standing to clear the dishes. Cole watched her go, kicking himself for his clumsy words, or maybe for his cowardice in not meaning them the way his heart had intended. That night, as Clara lay in her small room, she could hear Cole pacing the main floor, back and forth, steady as a heartbeat, the rhythm of a man wrestling with thoughts that wouldn't let him rest. "Her love got out of hand," she whispered to the darkness, remembering the words from some half-forgotten song. She was falling for her husband, her business arrangement. Marriage of convenience husband, and there was nothing convenient about it. In the main room, Cole finally stopped pacing. He stood at the window, looking out at the star-filled sky, and admitted what Jose had already seen. He was getting attached to Clara Rose Walker, more than attached, and that terrified him more than drought, debt, or Deacon Hale combined. The first sign of real trouble came 3 weeks after Hale's visit. Cole found 5 cattle dead near the eastern boundary, foam dried around their mouths. Billy Tate knelt beside one of the carcasses, his weathered face grim. "Poison," Billy said simply. "Probably in the water." Cole felt rage build in his chest, hot and dangerous. "You're certain?" "Seen it before. Someone dumped something in the creek upstream." Billy stood, dusting off his knees. "This ain't no accident, boss." Word spread quickly. By afternoon, half of Cedar Springs had heard about the poisoned cattle. By evening, Deacon Hale was holding court outside the general store, his voice carrying clearly down Main Street. "I warned them," Hale proclaimed to anyone who would listen. "I said that woman would bring calamity, and here's the proof. 5 head dead, and mark my words, this is only the beginning." Clara heard about it when she went to town for supplies, accompanied by Jimmy. The young man's face was flushed with anger as they loaded the wagon. "It ain't right. Mrs. Walker, everybody knows you didn't poison no cattle. You were with us when it happened." "Logic rarely defeats fear. Jimmy!" Clara kept her voice steady, though inside she was seething. "Help me with these sacks." As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Morrison emerged from the bank, flanked by 2 other town matrons. Clara braced herself, but instead of the usual cold shoulders, the women approached directly. "Mrs. Walker, Mrs." Morrison's voice dripped false sympathy. "Such terrible news about your cattle, though I suppose it was to be expected." "Expected?" Clara's tone could have cut glass. "Well, given your history, first Amarillo, then Las Cruces. Now here, the pattern is quite clear." "Yes, the pattern of small minds finding convenient scapegoats." Clara stepped closer, noting with satisfaction how Mrs. Morrison stepped back. "Tell me, Mrs. Morrison, when your husband's investments failed last year, who did you blame when your roses died in the drought? Was that my fault too, even though I wasn't here?" "How dare you?" "I dare because I'm tired of being blamed for nature's cruelties and men's failures." Clara's voice rose, drawing attention from passers-by. If you spent less time spreading gossip and more time showing Christian charity, perhaps this town would be less cursed by its own meanness.
Mrs.
Morrison's face went purple.
You.
Witch, Jezebel, curse-bringer. Say it, Mrs. Morrison. Say what you're thinking so everyone can hear how a banker's wife speaks of her neighbors. The woman spun on her heel and stormed off, her companions scurrying after. Jimmy let out a low whistle. That was something, ma'am, but it might not have been wise.
Wisdom is a luxury I can't afford anymore.
Clara climbed onto the wagon seat. Let's go home. They were halfway back to the ranch when they saw the smoke. Black and oily. It rose from the direction of the double bar in a column that spoke of disaster. Clara's heart stopped. The barn, Jimmy breathed. Oh no, the barn! He spurred his horse ahead while Clara urged the wagon team to dangerous speeds. They crested the final rise to see the ranch hands forming a bucket brigade, fighting desperately to save the structure. Cole was in the thick of it, his shirt already singed and blackened. Clara jumped from the wagon before it fully stopped, grabbing a bucket and joining the line. The horses, she shouted to Billy.
Got 'em out.
He passed another bucket. But the feed were going to lose the winter feed. They fought for what felt like hours, though it was probably less than one. Finally, the flames were beaten back, leaving half the barn standing but the feed storage completely destroyed. Cole stood staring at the smoldering ruins, his face a mask of ash and despair. 6 months of hay, he said quietly. Gone. Clara moved to his side, not caring that she was covered in soot and ash.
We'll find more.
With what money? Cole's voice was hollow.
We can't afford to buy feed, and there's nothing left to cut.
The cattle will starve come winter.
Then we'll sell some cattle now, while they're still healthy. Use the money for feed.
Sell to who you think anyone in town will buy from us now. He turned to her, and she saw the defeat in his eyes. Maybe Hale's right. Maybe you should take that money and go. The words hit Clara like a physical blow.
You want me to leave?
I want you to be safe. He gestured at the burned barn. This is escalating. Next time it might not be the barn. Next time it might be... He couldn't finish the sentence. The next time it might be me. Clara's chin lifted. I've faced worse than Deacon Hale. Cole Walker. I won't run now.
This isn't your fight?
You keep saying that. Clara's temper finally snapped. When does it become my fight? When I've cooked enough meals, mended enough clothes, when I've been here a month, a year? Or is it that you still see this as just a business arrangement? Something you can dissolve when it becomes inconvenient?
That's not...
Isn't it? Tears mixed with the soot on her face. I've tried so hard to belong here, to be the wife you need, even if it's just for show. But you still hold me at arm's length, still see me as that desperate woman who needed your charity.
Clara, no.
Cole reached for her, but she stepped back.
I need some air.
She walked away, leaving him standing among the ashes. Jose found her an hour later, sitting by the creek where the cattle had been poisoned. She'd washed the worst of the soot from her face and hands, but her dress was ruined.
He doesn't mean it,
Jose said, settling beside her with the careful movements of a man whose joints protested. When Cole gets scared, he pushes people away. Did the same thing when Sarah got sick. He still loves her. It wasn't a question. See, but love isn't a well that runs dry, Senora. The heart, it has room for more than one love in a lifetime. Not his heart, apparently. Jose chuckled. You think he looks at you like a business partner? No, he looks at you like a man afraid of drowning who sees a life rope but fears it will break if he grabs it.
I'm tired of being feared,
Clara said softly. By the town, by him, I just want...
Oh, what do you want, Senora?
She picked up a stone and threw it into the water.
I want to belong somewhere, to someone.
I want a home that can't be taken away by the next drought or the next small-minded man with power.
Then fight for it,
Jose said simply.
You stood up to the town women today. Billy told me. Now stand up to that stubborn man who's too scared to admit he cares for you."
That evening, Cole found Clara in the kitchen, salvaging what supplies had survived the day's chaos. She'd changed into her other dress and pulled her hair back severely, looking every inch the practical housewife rather than the woman who'd fought fire beside him hours before.
"Clara, we need to talk." "Yes, we do." She turned to face him. "But first, you need to listen. Sit."
Surprised by her commanding tone, Cole sat. "I married you to save your land." Clara began. "You married me for the same reason. That was our arrangement. But somewhere between then and now, something changed, at least for me."
Cole started to speak, but she held up her hand. "Let me finish. I've fallen in love with this ranch, with the way the sun sets behind the mountains, with the sound of cattle lowing in the evening, with Jimmy's terrible jokes and Billy's gruff wisdom, with the challenge of making something from nothing, of building a life from dust and determination." She moved closer, her green eyes intense. "And I've fallen in love with you, Cole Walker, not because you saved me, but because of the way you care for your men, the way you fight for what's right even when it costs you, because of your stupid, stubborn pride and your hidden gentleness, and the way you still look at the stars every night like they might tell you secrets." Cole's breath caught. "Clara!" "I'm not finished." Her voice was steady now. "I know you didn't bargain for this, neither did I. But here we are. And I won't apologize for my feelings. And I won't run because they make you uncomfortable. But I also won't stay where I'm not wanted. So you need to decide. Cole, am I your wife, really and truly? Or am I just a convenient solution to a legal problem?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibilities. Finally, Cole stood, moving toward her slowly, as if approaching a spooked horse. "The first night you were here," he said quietly, "you stood on the porch and talked about falling up into the stars. I hadn't looked at them, really looked, since Sarah died. But that night, I saw them through your eyes, saw the wonder I'd forgotten existed." He stopped just out of reach. "You want to know what scares me more than losing the ranch, losing you? To Hale's violence, to the town's cruelty, to your own good sense when you realize you deserve better than a broken-down rancher and his failing land." "You're not broken," Clara whispered. For 3 years, I was walking dead, just going through the motions. Then you came along with your fierce pride and your terrible coffee." "My coffee is not terrible." "It's terrible, Clara, but you make it with such determination that it tastes better anyway." He finally closed the distance between them, cupping her soot-smudged face in his hands. "I don't want a business arrangement anymore. I want a wife. I want you, if you'll still have me after I've been such a fool." Instead of answering with words, Clara rose on her toes and kissed him. It was awkward and desperate and tasted of smoke and tears, but it was also a claiming of him, of them, of the future they would fight for together. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "But her love got out of hand," he murmured, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Completely out of hand," Clara agreed. "Utterly unmanageable. Absolutely no hope of containing it." "Good." A throat clearing made them spring apart. Billy stood in the doorway, trying to hide a grin. "Sorry to interrupt, but we've got company coming. Looks like half the town, and Hale's leading them." Cole's face hardened. "Armed?" "Some of them, but there's women and children too. Looks more like a mob than a posse." "They're coming to drive me out," Clara said quietly. "This is how it happened in Las Cruces. First the accusations, then the fire, then the righteous mob. Not this time." Cole strapped on his gun belt. "Billy, get the men positioned, but tell them no shooting unless I give the word. Clara." "I'm standing with you." "Clara, we face this together. Remember, for better or worse. Isn't that what we promised?" He studied her determined face, then nodded.
Together, then, they walked out onto the porch as the mob approached. Deacon Hale rode at the front, his face glowing with righteous fervor. Behind him came townspeople. Clara recognized the baker, the blacksmith, several farmers, their wives, even Mrs. Morrison was there, riding in a buggy like Queen. Walker, Hale called out, "We've come for the woman. Hand her over, and we'll leave peacefully." "The woman has a name," Cole said calmly. "She's Mrs. Clara Walker, my wife, and she's not going anywhere." "Your wife," Hale spat the word. "A marriage built on lies to circumvent the law. But God's law supersedes man's law. Walker, and God has shown us her true nature. Poisoned cattle, burned barns. How much more evidence do you need?" "Evidence?" Clara stepped forward. "You mean the poison that was dumped upstream of our land? The fire that started while I was in town, if I have such power? Mr. Hale, why would I curse the very place that shelters me?" "Don't listen to her." Hale turned to address the crowd. "See how she twists words? Clouds minds. This is her wickedness at work." "The only wickedness I see," a new voice called out, "is a man using fear to get what he wants." Everyone turned to see Tom Hendricks pushing through the crowd. Jimmy's father looked nervous but determined. "I've been thinking on what's been happening, and something don't sit right. Every bad thing that's happened to the double bar has helped one person, you, Deacon." "How dare you!" "You've been after Walker's land for years. Couldn't get it legal-like. So now you're trying to run them off with fear and violence." Tom looked around at his neighbors. "We all know Cole Walker's a good man. Are we really going to run his wife out of town based on superstition?" "She's cursed," someone called out. "Every place she goes." "Every place she goes, scared people looking for someone to blame find her convenient." Clara interrupted. "Yes, I was in Amarillo during the drought, teaching children their letters. I was in Las Cruces during the fever, nursing the sick. I was in Silver City when the mine collapsed, sewing shrouds for the dead." Her voice rose with each word. "Is it a curse to help others to work for my bread, to try to build a life despite having no family, no protector, no home?" "Don't let her deceive you." Hale's voice was becoming shrill. "She admits she brings death wherever." "I bring nothing but myself," Clara said firmly. "A woman alone, trying to survive in a world that would rather see me beg or worse. And every time, when trouble comes, as trouble comes to all places, I'm the easiest one to blame." She looked around at the crowd, meeting eyes where she could. "How many of you have faced hard times, drought, disease, death? Did you need someone like me to cause them? Or did they come on their own, as troubles do?" Cole saw the doubt creeping into some faces. "Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house was whispering to her neighbor. The blacksmith was frowning thoughtfully. "Enough talk." Hale dismounted, pulling a rope from his saddle. "If Walker won't see reason, we'll take her ourselves." That was when Cole drew his gun. "First man to touch my wife gets a bullet. That's a promise." "Hale." The crowd tensed. Some of the men reached for weapons, but others held back, uncertain. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Then Clara did something unexpected. She laughed, not hysterically, but with genuine amusement. "A rope. Mister. Hale, really, are we in medieval times? Will you test if I float next?" Despite the tension, someone in the crowd snickered. Then another. "This isn't funny." Hale's face was purple with rage. "No, it's pathetic," Clara said. "A grown man so desperate for land he'll stir up a mob against a woman whose only crime is marrying the owner." She looked directly at Mrs. Morrison. "Tell me, Mrs. Morrison, when your husband forecloses on farms, do you call him cursed when he takes homes from families who can't pay? Is he bringing evil to the town?" "Mrs." Morrison's face went white, then red. "That's business. So is poisoning cattle and setting fires, apparently when it drives down land prices." Clara's implication was clear. "She's accusing me." Hale stepped forward. but found himself facing not just Cole's gun, but Billy's and Jose's as well. The ranch hands had moved into position, protecting their mistress. "Seems to me," Tom Hendricks said slowly, "that we ought to let the sheriff sort this out. Legal-like, not with mobs and ropes."
"The sheriff's 2 days away,"
someone pointed out. "Then we wait 2 days," Tom said firmly. "We're not vigilantes. We're civilized people. At least, I thought we were." The crowd began to fragment. Some nodded agreement with Tom. Others muttered uncertainly. The momentum Hale had built was dissipating like smoke. "You'll regret this." Hale mounted his horse with shaking hands. "When your crops fail, when your children sicken, when everything you've built turns to ash, remember that you could have prevented it." "The only thing we're preventing," Cole said quietly, "is murder. And if I find out you had anything to do with my poisoned cattle or burned barn, Hale, you'll be the one needing the sheriff's protection." The night after the mob dispersed, an uneasy quiet settled over the Double Bar Ranch. Cole doubled the watch, posting men at strategic points around the property. He couldn't shake the image of Hale's face, twisted with rage and something darker desperation. Clara found him on the porch near midnight, staring into the darkness with his rifle across his knees. "You should be sleeping," he said without turning.
"So should you."
She sat beside him, pulling her shawl tighter against the cool night air.
"Do you really think he'll try something tonight?"
Hale's like a cornered snake now. Tom Hendricks exposing his interest in the land. You turning the crowds thinking he's lost control of the narrative. That makes him dangerous. They sat in companionable silence, listening to the night sounds, coyotes in the distance, the rustle of wind through dry grass, the occasional low of cattle.
"I was terrified today,"
Clara admitted quietly.
"when I saw that rope."
Cole's hand found hers in the darkness. "I wouldn't have let them take you." "I know. But for a moment, I was back in Las Cruces, watching them drive out the Mexican family they blamed for the fever. The look in people's eyes when fear takes over, it's the same everywhere." "Not everyone joined Hale today." Tom spoke up. Others listened.
"Because you stood with me."
Clara squeezed his hand.
"In Las Cruces, in Silver City,
I was alone. Easy to dismiss, easier to blame. But today I had you. The men, it made a difference." Cole turned to study her profile in the moonlight.
"You had yourself too. The way you faced them down,
turned their fear back on them, that was all you. My mother used to say that bullies hate being laughed at more than being fought. I thought of her when I saw Hale with that rope, looking like something out of a bad melodrama. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman."
She would have liked you."
Clara leaned against his shoulder.
"She always said I should marry a man who did more thinking than talking."
"Well, I certainly qualify there," Cole said dryly. "Sarah used to complain she had to pry words out of me with a crowbar." It was the first time he'd mentioned his late wife easily, without the usual shadow crossing his face. Clara recognized the gift of trust in it. "Tell me about her." Cole was quiet for so long, Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then,
"She was everything I wasn't.
sociable, educated, refined. Her father ran the school in Austin before they moved here. She could have married anyone, the banker's son, the lawyer from Santa Fe. Instead, she chose me. Because she saw who you really were. Maybe, or maybe she just liked a challenge." There was wry humor in his voice now. "She tried to civilize me. Got me reading books, wearing proper clothes to church, using the right fork at dinner. Then she'd turn around and help with branding, or ride out to check the herds with me. Said she liked the contradiction. She sounds wonderful."
And when the fever took her,"
Cole's voice roughened, "I shut down, shut everyone out. It was easier than feeling, these past 3 years, I've just been going through the motions. Until a desperate woman with $7 and too much pride walked into my life and reminded me that living means more than just surviving."
Clara lifted her head to look at him. In the moonlight, she could see the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear of opening himself to potential loss again. "I can't promise I won't die," she said softly. "None of us can promise that. But I can promise that while I'm living, I'll live with you, not just near you. If you'll let me." Cole's response was to pull her closer, pressing his lips to her temple. They stayed that way, watching the night together, until Billy's low whistle alerted them. "Riders coming," Billy called softly. "From the east, moving quiet-like." Cole was on his feet instantly, rifle ready. "How many?" "Can't tell. 4, maybe 5. "Get the men up, quiet as you can." Clara started to rise, but Cole pressed her back down. "Stay low. Get inside if shooting starts." "Cole." "Please, Clara. I can't protect the ranch and worry about you getting shot." She nodded reluctantly, moving to crouch by the door. Cole positioned himself at the porch rail, Billy and Jose flanking him. Jimmy and the other hand spread out, taking cover. The riders emerged from the darkness slowly, and Cole recognized Deacon Hale's distinctive silhouette. But something was different. These weren't townsmen. These were harder cases, men who wore their guns like they knew how to use them. "That's close enough. Hale!" Cole called out. The riders stopped just at the edge of the yard. Hale's voice carried clearly in the still air. "I've come to make you a final offer. Walker, Morrison's willing to pay off your debt. Give you traveling money besides. All you have to do is sign over the deed and leave. Tonight." "Not interested." "You should be." One of the other riders struck a match, the small flame illuminating a harsh face Cole didn't recognize. "Because if you don't take the offer, things are going to get unpleasant." "Hired guns. Hale." Cole kept his voice steady. "That's low, even for you." "Insurance." Hale corrected. "Mr. Johnson here and his associates specialize in resolving property disputes." Johnson, the man with the match, smiled unpleasantly. "We surely do. Amazing how many folks decide to sell when their wells get poisoned, their barns burn, their cattle die mysterious-like." "So you admit to poisoning my cattle?" "I admit to nothing, just observing how unfortunate events tend to cluster sometimes." Johnson lit a cigar with elaborate casualness. "Course, sometimes those events affect more than just livestock. Sometimes women get caught in the crossfire. Terrible when that happens." Cole's finger found the trigger. "You threatening my wife?" "Threatening?" Johnson's laugh was ugly. "We're just talking about possibilities. What might happen if stubborn folks don't see sense?" Clara stepped out onto the porch before Cole could stop her. "Mr. Johnson, tell me, what's the going rate for terrorizing families these days? What does a man's conscience cost?" Johnson's smile faltered. "Lady, you'd best get back inside." "Why, so you can make your threats without looking at who you're threatening." Clara moved to stand beside Cole. "I'm curious what kind of man burns barns and poisons cattle for money. Were you born without a soul? Or did you sell it piecemeal?" "Clara," Cole warned. But she wasn't finished. "And you, Mr. Hale?" Hiding behind hired thugs now. "What would your congregation think if they knew their deacon employed killers?" "Killers?" Hale's voice rose. "I've hired no killers. These men are simply security." "Security that poisons wells and burns barns." Clara's laugh was bitter. "How fortunate that Cedar Springs has such devoted protectors." Johnson's hand moved toward his gun. "Lady's got a mouth on her. Walker, maybe someone should teach her to keep it shut." The click of multiple rifles cocking filled the air. Every ranch hand had a bead on the riders. "Maybe someone should try," Cole said quietly. "See how far they get." The tension stretched taut. Then, from the darkness behind Hale's group, came the sound of more horses. Lots of them. "What the hell?" Johnson twisted in his saddle. Tom Hendricks rode into view,
And he wasn't alone. Behind him came a dozen men from town, the blacksmith, the baker, several farmers, even Doc Grayson. "Evening, Cole." Tom called out pleasantly. "We thought you might have visitors tonight. Figured you could use some neighborly support." Hale's face was white in the moonlight. "What are you doing here?" "Hendricks." "Oh, just exercising our rights as concerned citizens." Funny thing after today's excitement. Some of us got to talking. Remembered things, like how you tried to buy the Martinson place right after their well went bad, and the Cleary's farm after their barn burned. "Coincidence," Hale sputtered. "Lot of coincidences." The blacksmith, Carl Brennan, spoke up. "Too many for my taste." Johnson and his men were looking nervous now, outnumbered and outgunned. "This ain't our fight," Johnson said. "We were just delivering a message." "Then deliver this one back to whoever hired you," Tom said. "Cedar Springs takes care of its own, all of its own, including the Walkers." "You fools," Hale's composure finally cracked completely. "You're protecting a cursed woman. She'll bring ruin on all of you." "Only ruin I see," Doc Grayson said mildly, "is what greed brings, and fear. I've been thinking on what Mrs. Walker said today about being in Las Cruces during the fever, nursing the sick. Takes courage to do that, more courage than running folks out of town." Clara's hand found Cole's in the darkness. He could feel her trembling, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Thank you, Doctor, all of you. I don't have words for what this means." "Don't need words." Carl Brennan said, "Just need good neighbors. That's what makes a community." Johnson had seen enough. "We're leaving." He turned his horse, then looked back at Hale. "You want to pursue this, you're on your own." As the hired guns rode off, Hale sat frozen in his saddle, watching his carefully constructed plan crumble. "You should go too, Deacon," Tom said, "and maybe think about whether Cedar Springs really needs your kind of guidance anymore." "This isn't over," Hale said, but the threat sounded hollow now. "You can't protect them forever." "Don't need forever," Tom replied. "Just need long enough for the sheriff to get here. Already sent my boy to fetch him. Should be here by tomorrow night." Hale's face went from white to gray. Without another word, he wheeled his horse and disappeared into the darkness. The tension broke. Men dismounted, shaking hands, clapping shoulders. Clara found herself surrounded by townspeople who, just hours before, had come to drive her out. Mrs. Walker, Mrs. Brennan, the blacksmith's wife, approached hesitantly. "I owe you an apology. We all do. Let fear cloud our judgment." "There's no need." "There is." The woman's face was earnest. "My grandmother was accused of witchcraft in the old country. Driven from her home, I should have known better than to let the same happen here." Others came forward with similar words. Not everyone, some still hung back, suspicious but enough to make Clara's eyes fill with tears. "Thank you," she managed. "Thank you all." As the crowd finally dispersed, Tom Hendricks lingered. "Cole, there's something else. That fire today, my boy saw something. Someone running from the direction of your barn just before the smoke started. Couldn't see who, but they were heading toward Hale's place." "Will Jimmy testify to that?" "Already has. Wrote it all down for the sheriff." Tom mounted his horse. "You folks try to get some rest. I have a feeling tomorrow's going to be interesting." After everyone left, Cole and Clara stood alone in the yard. The night had grown quiet again, but it was a different quiet, safer somehow. "They came," Clara said wonderingly. "The town, they actually came to help us." "To help you," Cole corrected. "You're the one who changed their minds today, made them see past their fear." "We did it together." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I couldn't have stood up to them without knowing you were beside me." "Clara," Cole's voice was rough with emotion. "When Johnson threatened you,
I wanted to— Shh. She placed her fingers against his lips. I'm safe. We're safe. That's what matters. For now, the sheriff will deal with Hale, but there'll be others. This land, this life, it's hard, dangerous. You could still— If you're about to suggest I leave again, Cole Walker, I might have to shoot you myself. Despite everything, he found himself smiling. You don't even have a gun. Then I'll have to borrow yours. She stood on her toes, bringing her face closer to his. I'm not going anywhere. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever. You're stuck with me. Promise. I promise. They were still standing there, holding each other in the yard, when the eastern sky began to lighten. A new day was coming, bringing with it the sheriff, justice for Hale, and the chance to rebuild what had been burned. But more than that, it brought hope. For the first time in 3 years, Cole Walker watched the sunrise with someone beside him, someone who'd fought for the right to stand there. His accidental bride, his unexpected love, his partner in all things. Inside the house, breakfast needed making. Chores waited. The ranch demanded attention, but for just a moment longer. Cole and Clara stood together, watching the light paint the desert in shades of gold and promise. I love you, Cole said, the words coming easier now. I love you too, Clara replied, even if you did marry me just to save your land. Best business decision I ever made, he said, and felt her laugh against his chest. The barn still smoldered. The cattle still needed tending. The drought still threatened. But none of that seemed insurmountable anymore. They'd faced down mobs and threats, fear and fire. They'd do it again if needed. Together! Billy emerged from the bunkhouse, saw them embracing, and discreetly headed for the henhouse instead. About time, he muttered to himself, grinning. The sun climbed higher, painting away the shadows of night, and at the Double Bar Ranch, life went on harder than some days, easier than others, but no longer alone. Clara had found her home. Cole had found his heart. And sometimes, in the harsh lands of New Mexico territory, that was miracle enough. Sheriff Marcus Wade arrived the next evening, dusty and travel-worn but sharp-eyed. He was a tall, lean man in his 40s, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent more nights under stars than roofs. Tom Hendricks and several townsmen rode with him, their face grim with purpose. Cole, the sheriff greeted, dismounting at the ranch house. Tom's filled me in on the basics. Poisoned cattle, burned barn, hired guns making threats. That about cover it. That's the short version, Cole confirmed. Come inside. Clara's got coffee on. In the kitchen, Clara served the men while Sheriff Wade took notes in a worn leather book. She recounted everything from her arrival in Cedar Springs to the previous night's confrontation, her voice steady despite the painful memories. And you're certain it was Johnson who admitted to the poisonings? Wade asked. His exact words were that unfortunate events tend to cluster. Clara replied. Then he made threats about women getting caught in crossfire. Wade's expression darkened. I know Johnson. Run him out of 2 counties already for similar work. If he's involved, someone with deep pockets hired him. Deacon Hale has been trying to buy my land for years, Cole said, and he's got connections to Morrison at the bank. I'll need to talk to both of them. Wade closed his notebook. In the meantime, Mrs. Walker, I need to ask about your past. Tom mentioned you've been blamed for misfortunes in other towns. Clara's chin lifted slightly, but she answered calmly. Amarillo, Las Cruces, and Silver City. In each case, I was simply in the wrong place when tragedy struck, working as a teacher, a nurse, and a seamstress. Can anyone verify your account? I can, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see a woman standing there, middle-aged, well-dressed, with silver threading through her dark hair. Clara gasped. Mrs. Alvarado. Hello, Clara. The woman smiled warmly. Though it's Mrs. Jennings now. I remarried and moved here last year. You know each other? Sheriff Wade asked. Clara nursed my children through the fever in Las Cruces, Mrs. Jennings explained. Sat with them day and night when other nurses were too frightened. Both my boys lived because of her care. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Maria, how are they? Grown and healthy. Miguel's studying law in Santa Fe. Pablo runs our ranch. Mrs. Jennings turned to the sheriff. When I heard about the trouble here, about people calling Clara cursed, I had to come. This woman saved my children's lives at risk to her own. The only curse she carries is the tendency of small minds to blame the stranger for their troubles. You were in Las Cruces during the fever, Wade asked. The fever came from contaminated water, everyone knew it. The wells near the poor section of town were tainted. But when Clara arrived a month before, working at the mission hospital, fearful people found it easier to blame her than admit their own negligence in maintaining the water supply. Tom Hendricks leaned forward. What happened to her there? Mrs. Jennings' face hardened. A mob came to the hospital, said she'd brought the sickness. The sisters who ran the hospital tried to protect her, but... She shook her head. They drove her out with stones and curses, even after all she'd done. But you're here now, Clara said wonderingly. You spoke for me. I was too frightened then, too worried about my children to stand up for what was right. Mrs. Jennings took Clara's hands. I have regretted my cowardice ever since. When I heard what was happening here, I knew God was giving me a chance to make amends. Sheriff Wade had been writing steadily. This changes things considerably. Mrs. Jennings, would you be willing to testify to this if needed? Gladly. Good. Now, let's go have a talk with Deacon Hale. They found Hale at his house, a modest but well-appointed dwelling on the edge of town. He answered the door himself, his face going pale when he saw the sheriff. Evening, Deacon, Wade said pleasantly. Mind if we come in? Of course not. Hale stepped aside, his movements stiff. The parlor was filled with religious artifacts and books, presenting the image of a devout man. But Sheriff Wade wasn't interested in appearances. Tell me about your interest in the Walker Ranch, he said without preamble. I don't know what you mean. According to multiple witnesses, you've tried to purchase that land several times. Why? Hale straightened. It's good grazing land. I thought to expand my own holdings by hiring men like Johnson to terrorize the owners. I hired no one to terrorize anyone. Hale's voice rose. I hired protection. Yes, after that woman arrived. The town needed defending from her influence. Her influence? Wade's voice was skeptical. What influence would that be? She's cursed. Everything she touches withers and dies. Funny thing about that, Tom Hendricks interjected. The drought started before she arrived. The cattle sickness, too. Almost like someone was creating problems to drive down the land value. Hale's eye twitched. That's absurd. Is it? Sheriff Wade stood, moving to examine the books on Hale's shelf. You know what I find interesting? Deacon, your library here. Lots of agriculture books, livestock management, even one on... He pulled out a volume. Plant toxins and their effects on animals. Curious reading for a man of God. I like to be informed about my community's interests. Informed enough to know which plants would poison cattle if introduced to their water supply. The room went very still. Hale's face had gone from pale to flushed. You can't prove anything. Maybe not yet, Wade agreed. But I'm a patient man, and now that I know where to look... He smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. You might want to consider your options. Deacon, confession sits better with judges than conviction. They left Hale standing in his parlor, hands shaking as he gripped the back of a chair. Outside, Sheriff Wade turned to Cole and Clara.
He'll break. Men like him always do when the pressure mounts. In the meantime, I'll post a deputy at your ranch. We can handle ourselves. Cole said. I'm sure you can, but the law's on your side now. Let us do our job. Wade tipped his hat to Clara. Ma'am, I'm sorry for what you've endured. No one should be driven from town to town for the crime of being different. That evening, the ranch felt different. The constant tension that had gripped them for weeks was easing. Mrs. Jennings stayed for supper, regaling them with stories of Miguel and Pablo, filling in the years since Clara had seen them. You never told me you saved children during the fever, Cole said quietly when they had a moment alone. It didn't seem important. I was a nurse. It's what nurses do. While others ran, you stayed. Clara shrugged. Someone had to. The children didn't cause the fever. They didn't deserve to die for adults' failures. Cole pulled her close. And they called you cursed for it. Fear makes people cruel. Clara said simply, I've seen it too many times to take it personally anymore. I take it personally, Cole said fiercely. Every slight, every stone thrown, every cruel word, I take it all personally. Clara reached up to touch his face, then let it go. We have better things to focus on now. The next morning brought unexpected news. Morrison, the banker, had fled town during the night. His wife arrived at the ranch in hysterics. He's gone, Mrs. Morrison wailed. Took everything valuable and disappeared, left me with nothing but debts and shame. Clara, despite everything, brought the woman inside and gave her tea. When did you discover this? This morning. There was a note. Said the sheriff was getting too close, that everything was falling apart. Mrs. Morrison looked at Clara with red-rimmed eyes. He was part of it. The scheme to get your land. Hale promised him a percentage if they could force you out. Will you tell the sheriff this? Cole asked. Mrs. Morrison nodded miserably. I knew something was wrong, the late-night meetings, the strangers coming and going, but I didn't want to see. She looked at Clara. I'm sorry for everything, the things I said, the way I treated you. It's done, Clara said gently. We all make mistakes when we're afraid. Sheriff Wade arrived within the hour to take Mrs. Morrison's statement. The picture that emerged was damning a conspiracy between Hale and Morrison to acquire valuable ranch land through intimidation and sabotage, using Clara's reputation as a convenient cover. Morrison kept records. Mrs. Morrison revealed, hidden in his study. Everything's there, payments to Johnson, plans for the poisonings, even a schedule for future accidents. Wade sent men to secure the documents immediately. This is what we needed. Between this and what we already have, Hale's finished. The arrest, when it came, was almost anticlimactic. Hale didn't resist, didn't protest. He seemed to have aged a decade overnight, his righteous fire extinguished. As the sheriff led him away, he looked back at Clara. I still believe you're cursed, he said quietly. But perhaps I became a curse myself. Clara said nothing, but Cole felt her hand tighten in his. The town's reaction was mixed. Some expressed shock and shame at how easily they'd been manipulated. Others maintained their suspicion of Clara, though they kept it to whispers now. But enough people, like the Hendricks family and the Brennans, reached out with genuine warmth that Clara began to believe she might truly belong. A week after Hale's arrest, an unexpected visitor arrived. Cole was repairing the barn the community had come together to help rebuild when a well-dressed man on an expensive horse rode up. Mr. Walker, my name is Harrison Blackwood. I represent a group of investors from Santa Fe. Cole set down his hammer, instantly wary. If you're here about buying land. On the contrary, Blackwood smiled. We're interested in investing in your operation. Cattle prices are rising in the eastern markets. With proper backing, your ranch could triple its output. Why us? Because you've proven you can weather adversity. Because your wife showed remarkable courage in facing down a mob. Because sometimes, Mr. Walker, good business means backing good people. Cole found Clara in the garden she'd started, coaxing life from the dry soil. "We have a decision to make," he said, explaining Blackwood's offer. Clara listened thoughtfully, absently plucking weeds. "What do you want to do?" "I want to know what you think." She smiled. "I think we've spent enough time just surviving. Maybe it's time to try thriving." That evening, they sat on the porch as had become their custom, watching the sunset paint the desert in brilliant hues. The ranch spread before them, scarred by recent trials, but still standing, still theirs. "My mother used to say that home wasn't a place, but a feeling." Clara said, "The feeling of being where you belong, with who you belong with." "And do you feel that here?" Clara turned to look at him, and in her eyes, he saw his answer. "Every day. Even the hard ones, especially the hard ones." Cole pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, negotiations with investors, rebuilding what had been destroyed, navigating their place in a community that had nearly torn itself apart. But tonight, they had this each other, their land, and the knowledge that they'd faced the worst and survived. More than survived, they'd found love in the most unlikely circumstances. "You know what's funny?" Clara said suddenly. "What?" "Hale was right about one thing. I am cursed." She felt Cole tense and hurried to explain. "Cursed to always be where trouble finds me, but maybe that's not entirely bad. If I hadn't been cursed, I wouldn't have ended up here, wouldn't have found you." "Then bless your curse," Cole said firmly. "And bless the day you walked into that boarding house parlor with your $7 and your stubborn pride." "Only $7, Clara laughed. "I'll have you know I'm worth at least 10 now." "Priceless," Cole corrected. "Worth everything I have and more." In the distance, a coyote called, and another answered. The desert was coming alive with its nocturnal symphony. And at the Double Bar Ranch, two people who'd started as strangers, united by desperation, had become something more: partners, lovers, family. The land was saved. The truth was revealed. Justice, in its slow way, was being served. But more than that, love had taken root in unlikely soil and bloomed despite drought and adversity. And sometimes, in the harsh beauty of New Mexico territory, that was the greatest miracle of all. The trial of Deacon Hale drew crowds from 3 counties. The courthouse in Cedar Springs overflowed with spectators eager to witness the fall of a man who'd wielded fear like a weapon. Clara sat in the front row beside Cole, her hands folded calmly despite the whispers that still followed her. Judge Samuel Hartley, brought in from Santa Fe to ensure impartiality, was a stern man with piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. As witness after witness testified Mrs. Morrison about her husband's involvement, Tom Hendricks about the pattern of harassment, Sheriff Wade about the evidence, found a clear picture emerged of calculated cruelty disguised as righteousness. When Clara was called to testify, the courtroom fell silent. She walked to the witness stand with quiet dignity, the same bearing that had faced down mobs and threats. "State your name for the record," the prosecutor instructed. "Clara Rose Walker." "Mrs. Walker, tell us about your first encounter with the accused." Clara's voice was steady as she recounted Hale's attempts to drive her away. The escalating threats, the burned barn, the poisoned cattle, but when asked about the night the mob came, her composure cracked slightly. "He brought a rope," she said quietly. "Said they would take me themselves if my husband wouldn't hand me over. I've seen mobs before. Mr. Prosecutor, I know what happens when fear overrides reason. People stop seeing a person and start seeing a symbol of everything they're afraid of." "And what were they afraid of?" Clara looked directly at Hale. "The unknown, the different, bad fortune they couldn't control. I was convenient a stranger, a woman alone, someone they could blame without consequence. Or so they thought. The defense attorney, a nervous young man clearly out of his depth, tried to paint Clara as the true villain. Isn't it true, Mrs. Walker, that misfortune has followed you from town to town?
Misfortune exists in every town,
Clara replied. The difference is whether people face it with courage or look for scapegoats. But you admit that drought, disease, and disasters occurred wherever you lived. I admit that I lived in places where such things occurred. By that logic, should we blame the doctor for disease because he's present during epidemics? The firefighter for flames because he appears at fires? A ripple of agreement went through the crowd. The young attorney, flustered, tried another approach. You've profited from this situation. Haven't you gained a husband, a home, security? Clara's chin lifted. I gained a partner who judges me by my actions, not by superstition. If that's profit, then yes, I've profited. But I've also been threatened, attacked, nearly burned alive, and blamed for everything from drought to cattle disease. Strange profits indeed. When Cole testified, his words were fewer but carried weight. Hale wanted my land. He couldn't get it legally, so he used my wife as an excuse to drive us out. He hired killers, Mr. Prosecutor, men who bragged about poisoning wells and burning barns. That's not righteousness. That's greed wearing a preacher's coat. The most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source. Johnson, the hired gun, had been captured trying to leave the territory and offered a deal for his cooperation. His account of Hale's instructions was chilling in its casualness. He said, make their lives miserable. Johnson testified, start with the livestock, move to property damage. If that didn't work, he shrugged. He said accidents happen on ranches all the time, especially to women who don't watch where they're going. The courtroom erupted. Judge Hartley had to pound his gavel repeatedly to restore order. Clara felt Cole's hand grip hers tightly, his knuckles white with suppressed rage. Mrs. Jennings testified about Clara's heroism during the Las Cruces fever, bringing several spectators to tears with her account of Clara nursing dying children. They called her cursed while she risked her life to save others. The real curse is ignorance and fear. The real curse is men like Deacon Hale who exploit that fear for gain. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they filed back in, their faces were grim with purpose. We find the defendant guilty on all charges, the foreman announced. Conspiracy, attempted murder, destruction of property, and incitement to violence. Hale stood as Judge Hartley pronounced sentence 20 years in territorial prison. As the guards led him away, he turned one last time to Clara. I pray God forgives us both, he said.
He already has,
Clara replied. The question is whether you'll forgive yourself. Outside the courthouse, the crowd parted for Cole and Clara. Some still looked at her with suspicion, but many nodded respectfully. Mrs. Brennan pressed a freshly baked pie into Clara's hands. Doc Grayson tipped his hat. Even some who'd been in the mob offered awkward apologies. It's not everything, Tom Hendricks said, walking with them to their wagon. But it's a start. Towns heal slow, but they do heal. That evening, the ranch felt lighter somehow. The shadow that had hung over them for months was lifting. Billy and the Hands had prepared a celebration dinner, complete with Jose's special tamales and a cake Jimmy had somehow managed not to burn. To justice. Billy raised his coffee cup in a toast. To courage, Jose added, looking at Clara. To community, Tom Hendricks said, having stayed for the meal. To home, Clara said softly, her eyes on Cole. To family, Cole concluded, and everyone drank. Later, as they walked along the creek in the moonlight, Clara seemed unusually quiet. Regrets? Cole asked. No, just thinking about Hale's last words, about forgiveness. You don't owe him forgiveness, Clara. I know, but holding on to anger is like gripping a hot coal. It only burns the one who holds it. She stopped walking, turning to face him.
I've been running from place to place for so long, carrying the weight of everyone who blamed me, hated me, feared me. Maybe it's time to set that weight down. Cole pulled her close. And what will you carry instead? Hope, Clara said simply. Love, the future we're building together. They stood by the water, listening to its gentle murmur. Despite the drought, the creek still flowed reduced but persistent, like hope itself. Cole, Clara's voice was hesitant. There's something I need to tell you. He tensed, old fears rising. What is it? I've been feeling unwell in the mornings, tired, and Mrs. Jennings, she noticed some things, suggested I see Doc Grayson. Cole's heart nearly stopped. Are you ill? Clara laughed, a sound like music. Not ill, expecting. The world seemed to tilt. Cole stared at her, unable to process the words. Expecting. A baby, Cole, our baby. Joy and terror warred in his chest. But is it safe after everything that's happened? Doc Grayson says I'm healthy as a horse. Apparently, fighting off mobs and saving ranches agrees with me. Her smile was radiant in the moonlight. Are you happy? Happy. Cole lifted her off her feet, spinning her around as she laughed. Clara, Words failed him. He set her down gently, cupping her face in his hands. I'm everything, happy, terrified, grateful, amazed. We're having a baby. We're having a baby, she confirmed. They walked back to the house hand in hand, making plans in the excited, jumbled way of expectant parents everywhere. The empty rooms would be filled. The quiet would be broken by cries and laughter. The ranch would echo with new life. Inside, they found Billy teaching Jimmy a card game while Jose mended harnesses. The ordinary evening scene struck Cole with its preciousness, this makeshift family they'd built, this home they'd defended. We have news, Clara announced. The men looked up expectantly. Come spring, the double bar will have a new hand, the smallest one yet. It took a moment for understanding to dawn. Then the ranch house erupted in celebration. Billy whooped. Jose crossed himself and began planning what he'd teach the little one about horses. Jimmy blushed and stammered congratulations. This calls for the good whiskey, Billy declared, producing a bottle from some hidden cache. As the men toasted and made increasingly wild predictions about the baby's future, Clara leaned against Cole, feeling the solid warmth of him. 6 months ago, she'd been alone, desperate, down to her last $7. Now she had a home, a family, a future growing inside her. No regrets about marrying a cursed woman, she teased. Only that I didn't do it sooner, Cole replied. Though I suppose if you hadn't been run out of all those other towns, you wouldn't have ended up here. Then bless every closed door that led me to this open one. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. A delegation of townswomen, led by Mrs. Brennan and Mrs. Hendricks, arrived with a proposal. We want to start a school, Mrs. Hendricks explained. A proper one. And we want you to teach. Clara. Clara nearly dropped the teacup she was holding. Me, but half the town still thinks I'm a woman who risked her life nursing sick children, Mrs. Brennan interrupted. Who stood up to corruption and fear, who showed us what courage looks like. That's what we want to teach our children. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Mrs. Hendricks smiled. The pay isn't much, but it's honest work, and we figure a woman who can face down Deacon Hale can certainly handle a classroom of youngsters. Clara looked at Cole, who nodded encouragingly. I'd be honored, she said, as the women discussed plans for the school. Cole watched Clara come alive with excitement. This was what had been missing, not just acceptance, but purpose, a chance to build something lasting in the community that had nearly rejected her. That afternoon, Harrison Blackwood returned with contracts for the investment partnership.
as Cole reviewed the terms with Tom Hendrick's help. Clara couldn't help but marvel at the reversal of fortunes. From facing foreclosure to expanding operations, the change was dizzying. "You'll need to hire more hands," Blackwood noted. "Maybe even a foreman to help Billy manage the increased herd." "I know some good men looking for work," Tom offered. "Families, too. That old bunkhouse could be converted to proper quarters." Plans spun out like Webb's new buildings, improved breeding stock, better irrigation for when the rains returned. The Double Bar would become one of the territory's premier ranches. But for Clara, the most important change was smaller and quieter. That evening, she found Cole in what would become the nursery, running his hands over the rough walls. "Needs work," he said. "New plaster, windows that close proper, maybe some of that wallpaper from San Francisco." "It's perfect," Clara said. "It's a mess." "It's ours." She moved into his arms. "That makes it perfect." They stood in the empty room, imagining it filled with life. Outside, the ranch settled into evening routines. Cattle lowed, horses nickered. Men called to each other as they finished the day's work. "You saved more than the land, you know," Cole said quietly. "You saved me, brought me back to life." "We saved each other," Clara corrected. "That's what partners do." As if in agreement, the baby moved for the first time, a flutter like butterfly wings. Clara gasped, pressing Cole's hand to her still flat stomach. "Did you feel that?" "I felt it." His voice was full of wonder. "Our baby, our future." They stood together in the gathering dusk, no longer the desperate strangers who'd married for convenience. They were husband and wife, partners, soon to be parents. They'd faced down fear and hatred, drought and fire, and emerged stronger. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the school to establish, the ranch to expand, a baby to prepare for. There would be setbacks and struggles, because life in the territory was never easy. But tonight, in this moment, they had everything they needed: each other, their land, their community, their future. Then her kiss took him apart, Cole murmured, remembering the old song's words. "Completely apart," Clara agreed, "and put you back together better than before." He kissed her then, there in their future child's room, with the last light of day painting the walls gold, and in that kiss was everything gratitude, promise, passion, home. The Double Bar Ranch stood strong against the desert night, no longer just a bastion against hardship, but a beacon of hope. Lives had been transformed within its boundaries. Love had bloomed in unlikely soil. And in the spring, new life would arrive to carry the story forward, a child born not of curses, but of blessings, not of fear, but of courage, not of desperation, but of love. The stars emerged one by one, ancient witnesses to the human drama below. And if they could speak, they might say that sometimes the greatest treasures come disguised as the greatest trials, that love can bloom in the harshest ground, and that home is not a place, but a person or people who see your true worth when all the world sees only curses. But stars keep their silence, and the story would be told instead by those who lived it, passed down through generations as a reminder that love, real love, can indeed get out of hand in the most wonderful way. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's exactly what saves us all. Spring came to New Mexico territory with a whisper of rain and the promise of new life. The desert, so long parched and unforgiving, began to show tentative signs of green. At the Double Bar Ranch, now expanded with new buildings and fresh paint, Clara Walker stood in the doorway of the schoolhouse, watching her students file out for the day. 6 months had transformed many things. Her belly, once flat, now rounded with life. The ranch, once struggling, now thrived under the partnership with Blackwood's investors. The town, once hostile, had largely embraced her, though some still crossed themselves when she passed. Mrs. Walker. Little Annie Brennan tugged at her skirts.
Will you teach us again tomorrow even with the baby coming? As long as I'm able, Clara promised, smoothing the girl's braids. Though soon, Mrs. Henderson will take over for a while. The children scattered to their waiting parents, and Clara began the slow walk back to the ranch house. These days, Cole insisted on having someone escort her, usually Jimmy or one of the new hands. But today, she'd sent them all on errands, needing a moment of solitude. The baby shifted within her, active as always in the late afternoon. Clara paused by the creek running fuller now with spring melt and remembered standing in this spot months ago, ready to flee. Now, wild horses couldn't drag her away. Clara. She turned to see Cole riding hard toward her, dust billowing behind his horse. Fear clenched her heart that urgency meant trouble. "What is it?" she called as he dismounted. "Doc Grayson sent word. Sarah Hendricks is in labor, but the baby's turned wrong. They need you." Clara didn't hesitate. Despite her condition, she was still the most experienced nurse in the territory. "Help me up." "Clara, you shouldn't be—" "Help me up. Cole, that girl needs me." The ride to the Hendricks farm was careful but swift. They found the household in controlled chaos, Tom pacing the porch while his younger children huddled together, wide-eyed. "Thank God," Tom said when he saw Clara. "Doc's with her, but he said you'd know what to do." Inside, Clara found young Sarah, barely 17, and Mary just a year laboring in distress. Doc Grayson looked relieved to see her. "Breech," he said simply. "I've tried to turn it, but—" Clara washed her hands and examined the girl, speaking soothingly all the while. What she found confirmed her fears this would be difficult, dangerous for both mother and child. "Sarah, listen to me," Clara said firmly. "Your baby needs help coming into the world. I can help, but it's going to be hard. You'll need to be brave." "I'm scared," Sarah whimpered. "I know. I'm scared too sometimes." Clara took the girl's hand. "But we're stronger than our fear. Women have been doing this since time began. You come from strong stock, Sarah Hendricks. Now let's bring this baby safely home." For the next 2 hours, Clara worked alongside Doc Grayson, using every technique she'd learned in Las Cruces, every bit of knowledge gained from helping deliver dozens of babies. Her own back ached. Her own baby protested the exertion, but she pushed through. "I can't," Sarah gasped after a particularly hard contraction. "You can and you will," Clara said. "One more push. Sarah, your baby's almost here." With a final, heroic effort, Sarah delivered her child a squalling, healthy boy despite his dramatic entrance. Clara cleared his airways and placed him on his mother's chest, both of them crying. "You did it," Clara said, exhausted but triumphant. "You both did it." As Doc Grayson tended to the aftermath, Clara stepped onto the porch where Cole waited with Tom. The new father's face was pale with worry. "You have a son," Clara announced. "Both healthy, both perfect." Tom nearly collapsed with relief. "Thank you, thank God, and thank you." Cole wrapped his arm around Clara, supporting her weight. "You're exhausted." "Good exhausted," she said, though she gratefully leaned into him. The kind that comes from something worthwhile. As they rode home in the wagon, Cole kept glancing at her. "That was dangerous. What you did. In your condition, would you have had me stay home while that girl suffered?" "No," he admitted. "That's not who you are. I worry." "I know." Clara took his hand. "But this is what I'm meant to do. Cole, teach children, help bring life into the world, build community. The very things they blamed me for in other towns, caring for the sick, educating the poor, those are my gifts." "I know," he said softly. "I'm proud of you. Just promise me you'll be careful. I can't lose you." "You won't," Clara promised. "We've come too far for that." 2 weeks later,
Clara's own time came. It started with a backache during morning chores and progressed quickly. By noon, she was in full labor, with Doc Grayson and Mrs. Jennings attending. Cole paced the porch like a caged wolf, flinching at every sound from inside. Billy and the hands tried to distract him with ranch business, but his attention never wavered from the house. First babies take time, Jose said philosophically. When my Rosa had our eldest, I nearly wore a groove in the floor. Sarah Hendricks was her first, Cole pointed out. That only took hours. Every birth is different, boss, Billy said. Clara's strong. She'll do fine. But as afternoon wore into evening and evening into night, Cole's fear grew. The sounds from inside were intense now, and Doc Grayson had called for more hot water twice. Then, just as the first stars appeared, a new sound split the air, the indignant cry of a newborn. Cole froze, afraid to hope. Minutes later, Mrs. Jennings appeared at the door, beaming. Mr. Walker, you have a daughter. Cole nearly ran through the doorway. In the bedroom, Clara lay propped against pillows, exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in the quilt Sarah had made years ago. Meet your daughter, Clara said softly. Cole approached slowly, as if in a dream. The baby was perfect tiny fists waving, rosebud mouth pursing in sleep. When he touched her cheek, she turned toward his finger, and his heart exploded with love so fierce it took his breath. She's beautiful, he managed, like her mother. She has your stubborn chin, Clara said, smiling tiredly. Lord help us when she's older. What shall we call her? Cole asked, sitting carefully on the bed's edge. Clara looked down at their daughter, then up at him. I was thinking, Hope. Hope, Sarah Walker. Hope. Cole repeated. Yes, that's perfect. As if in agreement, the baby opened her eyes gray like her father's and gazed up at them with ancient wisdom. The news spread quickly. By morning, half of Cedar Springs had stopped by with food, blankets, and good wishes. Even some who'd been in Hale's mob came with sheepish congratulations and baby gifts. Funny how a baby changes things, Tom Hendricks observed, holding his own infant son while his wife cooed over Hope. Hard to hold on to hate when there's new life to celebrate. The schoolhouse closed for a week as the town celebrated both births. Clara, recovering at home, was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Women who'd shunned her now brought meals and offered advice. Men who'd threatened her tipped their hats respectfully to Cole and inquired after mother and child. You've won them over, Mrs. Jennings said during one visit. Not through force or argument, but through service, by being yourself. Some still whisper, Clara pointed out. Still cross the street. There will always be some. Mrs. Jennings agreed. But look how many stand with you now. Look what you've built. What they'd built was impressive. The Double Bar Ranch had become one of the territory's most successful operations. The school Clara had started was thriving. Young couples were settling in the area, drawn by the promise of work and community. But more than buildings and businesses, they'd built connections. When drought threatened again that summer, the community pulled together, sharing water resources and feed. When illness swept through in the fall, Clara organized nursing rotations that saved lives. When bandits threatened the smaller ranches, Cole led the defense that drove them off. On Hope's first birthday, they held a celebration that brought together people from 3 counties. The yard of the Double Bar was full of tables groaning with food, children playing, musicians tuning instruments. Hard to believe it's only been 2 years since you rode into town, Billy said to Clara as they watched the festivities. Seems like you've always been here. Feels that way to me too, Clara admitted. Like all those other places, we're just way stations leading here. Cole appeared at her elbow. Hope balanced on his hip. The baby reached for her mother with chubby hands, babbling happily. The Blackwood investors are talking about building a rail spur. Cole said, would make shipping cattle easier, bring more prosperity to the area.
More changes, Clara mused. Think Cedar Springs is ready?
Change comes whether we're ready or not. Cole said, question is whether we guide it or let it run us over. As if to emphasize his point, an automobile, one of the first in the territory, came puttering up the road, drawing excited children like a magnet. The driver, a young man from Santa Fe, was immediately surrounded by curious ranchers. See, Cole said, world's changing fast, but some things stay the same.
Like what?
Like this. He kissed her, right there in front of everyone, earning hoots from the cowboys and applause from the ladies. Like family, like home, like the fact that I love you more every day, even when that seems impossible. Smooth talker, Clara accused, but her eyes were bright with tears. You just want me to forgive you for tracking mud through the house yesterday. Did it work? We'll see. As the sun set over the celebration, painting the desert in shades of gold and rose, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From $7 in desperation to this a thriving ranch, a beloved daughter, a place in the community she'd helped strengthen. No regrets, Cole asked, reading her thoughtful mood. Not one, Clara said firmly. Every hard step led here, to you, to hope, to home. Even being called cursed, being driven from town to town. Especially that. How else would I have found the one place where my supposed curse became a blessing, where the very things they feared me for healing, teaching, changing things were exactly what was needed. Hope squirmed to be let down, toddling toward a group of children with determined steps. Like her mother, she was fearless. Like her father, she was steady. Already, at just a year old, she was carving her own path. Think she'll stay? Cole asked, watching their daughter. When she's grown, will this be enough for her? I don't know, Clara admitted. The world's getting bigger. She'll have choices we never did, but she'll always know where home is, where love is. That's what matters. As night fell and lanterns were lit, the party continued. Stories were told. Songs were sung. Plans were made for the future. The Double Bar Ranch stood strong against the darkness. No longer just one family's struggle for survival, but a symbol of what could be built when people chose hope over fear, community over isolation, love over prejudice. And at the center of it all were Cole and Clara Walker, the taciturn rancher who'd married for land and the cursed woman who'd had nowhere else to go. They'd found in each other not just salvation, but transformation. Not just partnership, but passion. Not just survival, but life abundant. Dance with me, Clara said suddenly. Here, now. Here, now. While our daughter plays and our friends celebrate and the stars watch over us all. Cole took her in his arms, and they swayed to the fiddle music, surrounded by the life they'd built together. Other couples joined them, and soon the yard was full of dancing, laughing people. You know, Clara said as they turned slowly, I've been thinking about what Deacon Hale said at his trial, about praying for forgiveness. You've forgiven him. I have, not for his sake, but for mine, for Hope's. I don't want her growing up in the shadow of old hatred. You're a better person than I am, Cole said. No, just someone who's learned that love is stronger than fear, that building is better than burning, that sometimes the best revenge against those who try to curse you is to live a blessed life despite them. The music swelled, and they danced on, surrounded by friends who'd become family, on land that had been saved not just by legal maneuvering, but by courage and love. The curse had been broken not by magic or miracles, but by the simple, powerful act of refusing to run anymore. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, many stopped to thank Clara for teaching their children, for nursing their sick, for showing them that different didn't mean dangerous. Each thank you was a small victory. a stone in the foundation of belonging she'd built. "One more dance?" Cole asked as the musicians played their final song. "Always," Clara promised, and they danced in the lantern light, the reformed rancher and his no longer cursed wife, proof that love could indeed get out of hand in the most wonderful ways, that a kiss could take apart old walls and build new bridges, that sometimes the very thing others fear in you is exactly what the world needs. Hope toddled over, arms raised to be included. Cole lifted her up between them, and the three danced together, a family forged in unlikely circumstances, stronger for the fire they'd passed through. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The railroad, progress, change. There would be those who still whispered about curses, who still feared what they didn't understand. But tonight, under the vast New Mexico sky, there was only this love, laughter, and the living proof that home wasn't about perfect circumstances, but about finding where you belong and having the courage to claim it. The Double Bar Ranch settled into sleep, its windows glowing softly in the darkness. And if the desert wind carried whispers of old fears and ancient prejudices, it also carried something stronger, the sound of a baby's laughter, the murmur of lovers' promises, the unbreakable bonds of community. The story that had begun with desperation had become a legacy of hope. And that, perhaps, was the greatest miracle of all. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale. Are you listening at home? During your commute, or perhaps under your own starry sky? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Night and hit that like button. And if you really want to help more people discover these tales of the American frontier, please hit the hype button to share the love. Until our next adventure in the Old West, partners.